Well, hello and welcome to the 5th Drugstore Culture vodcast, and I'm joined by Olive Pometsey, our assistant editor, and Pete Hoskin, deputy editor. And it's been a very busy week for us, and I think the news agenda has been dominated, and I think our kind of emotions have been dominated by the Brett Kavanaugh hearings in America. Olive, what have you made of it? I mean, how have you responded? You wrote a brilliant piece about it on the site. What are your thoughts now?
Yeah, so I think the thing about the case is that it's so relatable to so many women. Christine Blasey Ford's, her testimony, I think so many young girls go through that when they're teenagers and they don't report it because it's been so normalised. It's not really something that you feel like is worth reporting because, you know, you hear people talking about it all the time, and I guess the only reason that she has come forward with it is because she thinks it's relevant, him being a Supreme Court nominee. So that's the most striking thing about it, but also the fact that so many people come to his defence because the fact that he was young, they think that can let him off, or that it doesn't matter.
I mean, I felt watching her and then Kavanaugh that she came across as a more plausible candidate for the Supreme Court. You know, she behaved with dignity and candour and considerable courage, and Pete came across as a blowhard and self-pitying fool, I thought, rather.
Yeah, he did basically. I think Olive's mentioned the word relevant is sort of crucial here, because this is hyper relevant, because we're talking about the next nominee to the Supreme Court. We're talking about tipping it towards the Republicans, make it a conservative Supreme Court, and so this is like mega politics that's happening. And
we should say that, you know, the Supreme Court decides so much more there than it does here.
Precisely.
Social policy and Roe versus Wade.
I mean, I should say as well, like Brett Kavanaugh, it's not just that Blasey Ford seemed like a better candidate. It's just that Kavanaugh, you're left thinking, how has he even got this far in his career? It's astonishing. But I almost think it's a slight tragedy that this is playing out in the realm of mega politics, because as Olive's piece made very clear, like, girls experience this every day, and have done for basically since time began, you know. And I think it's good that powerful men are being held to account, but at the moment it can feel, certainly from my perspective, that it is always just powerful men. It's the Harvey Weinsteins, or it's Brett Kavanaugh, or, you know, people at the top of professions, and even then not everyone, you know. There are entire industries that have been left untouched by this. So I guess my question is how much is this going to percolate down? How much does this change day-to-day life? I hope it does.
I mean, it's certainly dramatised these issues in I think one of the most powerful ways yet. I mean, everyone in America seemed to me to be watching it, and a lot of people around the world. It really, the world stood still almost, which is very unusual for a hearing for a judicial position. So it has that dramatic power, but I mean, to pick up Pete's question, does it then translate into a change of culture in workplaces, in the street, on public transport?
Well, I guess it depends if he gets away with it or not. Because, I mean, if the court hearing, if people vote that he's still allowed to go through the nomination, then it's just going to tell people that he can get away with that, and it's fine. It's like, that's okay behaviour. That, like, even if he did do it, it doesn't matter. That the experiences of women is just kind of irrelevant.
I think we should say that we're recording this before the decision by the committee, although it looks like one of the waverers, Jeff Flake, is probably going to vote for Kavanaugh, amazingly, and so as things stand now, his nomination looks more rather than less likely. Yeah, which is, I find, truly extraordinary.
Yeah, and it's a grand example of how this has become a political issue rather than a human issue. You know, that the Judiciary Committee is probably going to split. Republican, Democrat, more or less, and that's sort of not how it should be. And this whole thing has just been like a weird carnival, a very sad one. Certainly no fun in it. But Christine Blasey Ford, normally the normal procedure with accusations of sexual assault is that she would be looked after. This would be done behind closed doors. There would be a process. Instead, it's this weird, not a court process, where she's in front of the world being questioned, and none of the usual, or it doesn't seem that any of the usual sort of safety precautions and considerations have been put in place.
They had this rather weird idea of having a female prosecutor brought in to ask questions. I don't know about you, Oliver. I didn't feel that kind of worked as a technique to make her feel safe.
Well, I think she wasn't going to feel safe because she was in a room full of people that even if she knows that even if they do believe her, that they're not probably going to defend her.
Yes.
So she's not going to feel comfortable in any situation. And like you kind of just said, she's just been made even more vulnerable by the situation. Like, I read that she's had to move out of her house. She's been getting death threats and stuff like that. Like, what kind of message does that send to someone who, when you do come forward and say that you've been a victim of something like that, and then you just get the whole world shouting at you and trying to silence you again?
You can see as well that the female prosecutor is straining against normal practice. She knows what she would normally do in this sort of circumstance, and she's not allowed to do it. She's there as a veneer, And we've heard overnight as well that the Republicans have not been happy with her performance because she wasn't hitting the right attack points. But that's not her job, It's a mess.
It is a mess, and I think one of the things that worries me, one of my bugbears, is the phrase post-Me Too era, as though a year of Weinstein and others was kind of a capsule in history, and we're now into the thing has been accomplished. But actually, America is still very strongly divided over this. Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you feel about progress, Oliver? I mean, how far have we got on this?
It's difficult to say. I mean, it feels, I guess maybe there's more awareness, which is good, and people are more willing to come out, and I think, and people understand what classifies as sexual abuse a little bit more now. But I think in terms of people either change, like men changing their behaviour, or women. Actually, no, I do think women have become more confident in being, in terms of being able to defend themselves against men. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how many people it's reached in terms of preventing that kind of behaviour from even being an issue anyway. And I guess as well what we're seeing at the moment is that there's kind of this backlog of abuse that needs to be sorted out before we can even think about the future.
I mean, someone I was very disappointed to see was Senator Lindsey Graham, who I've met a few times, and in the context of his campaign with the late John McCain against torture, and always struck me as a very honourable and very witty guy, and yet to see him almost frothing at the mouth with fury over this was extremely depressing. Those are the moments where you do feel that the progress that's been made has also been matched by steps backward. I don't know if you agree with that. But
yeah, I guess the thing is with this case in particular that so many people have realised that they have a lot to lose, potentially as a result of the Me Too movement. So that's why people are getting so worked up about it. I mean, I don't want to say that certain people have acted certain ways, but I feel like there are a lot of men in powerful positions who are feeling like, shit, I've behaved in the wrong way, so I need to protect this person so that it doesn't have a knock-on effect on me.
What do you think the sequel is, Pete? What's the next step with all this? Do you think it's going to... I mean, it's very interesting what you say about it being played out at a high political level. Mm-hmm. And, it'll surely continue to be part of British politics, and is. I just wonder if there are ways of making it not simply a high political question, because that's obviously the next step, isn't it?
Yeah, I should say, when I say it's being played at a high political level, I am worried about how much it's filtering down, and I think that's sort of one of the big questions.
That it's not, you mean?
That it's not, yeah. I'm worried that it won't. But at the same time, it's good that it's happening at a high political level, because I think, for example, we're seeing it's terrible to see Christine Blasey Ford go through this, but at the same time it's kind of wonderful to see someone so brave on the stand, and I was thinking about this the other day, and so many people talk about the great men theory of history, that history is changed by your Alexander the Greats and your Napoleons, but there's a good book to be written, it may already have been written, about the brave women theory of history, and that's actually from Rosa Parks through to Harvey Weinstein's accusers to Christine Blasey Ford now, we're seeing very brave women change things, and they are brave women. It almost sounds patronising to say it, but like they have to be brave. That's the tragedy of the situation, is that they have to stand up in these situations and say things, and that is a very good thing. And I assume it's inspirational to me. I assume it's inspirational to a whole generation of younger women, and you know, we're seeing that in America as well, with more women are applying to be candidates, more women standing for office. That these are good things. So that's why it's good it's happening at a grand political level. And I guess that's also where you can see how it's filtering down. That's the sort of biggest sign so far. As for whether there's been an attitudinal shift among men, I don't know.
Do you see a backlash, Olive? I mean, personally in life, I mean, rather than just sort of in the news, do you think there is a backlash?
Not around the men that I hang around with. They've all kind of been nice about stuff, but I do think there are a lot of men that it maybe just haven't even reached. Like, I know I mentioned the other day that I was out in Notting Hill and this guy like came up to me and was like chatting to me and like ended up following me, and I don't think he's probably ever read a single article on Me Too ever. He wouldn't have done that. And yeah, so I guess it's more about the reach. And I think what you were saying about it being on a grand political scale, I think that's kind of a bad thing, because it's kind of skimming over the fact that people are trying to blame his actions on the fact that he was a teenager. And fundamentally, maybe what we need is better education in schools about consent and what is good behaviour, because that's where boys will learn. And you have like sex education in year 6, so when students are 11, and so there's no reason that anyone above that age shouldn't be able to conduct themselves properly in like a sexual encounter situation.
I mean, I feel very strongly that this is a very good illustration of one of the things we've talked a lot about since we started, which is the difference between and the relationship between culture and politics, which is that you can have a political movement, you can have a political change, but until the culture changes, nothing changes. And I'm still sceptical that cultural change is anywhere near embedded. I think this is a 20-year arc minimum. But you know, people talk about it as though it was a couple of years, which I think is crazy, a ridiculous way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, like, things have to change now for many, many years,
yes.
Including the education of young boys. I mean, hopefully one of the good things that will be achieved by these hearings is that teenagers will now think twice, teenage boys will now think twice before being horrible idiots, you know.
I mean, one of the things about modern life, of course, is that the kind of memory arguments that we now have will not necessarily happen in future because of social, because of phones, because of the constant reference in text and so on to everything we do. You know, had Christine Blasey Ford had a phone in those days, she would surely have sent a contemporaneous text or something to a friend, and this would not even be an issue. So today's teens and today's men generally need to be aware of that. You know, I mean, I think it's one of the great sort of undervalued assets of and achievements of the digital era is that we do have that ability to record instantly, which wasn't around all those years
precisely ago. If someone can be, well, he's not going to be blocked from being a Supreme Court judge, unfortunately, but if someone can have a rocky ride to being a Supreme Court judge because of things that happened 30 years ago, like, you can now not get a job because of things that happened 5 years ago, and it's much easier now, and that is actually a good thing, and it's a shame. It's unfortunate in a way to think that boys might think twice because of self-preservation, because they're thinking of their career, but you know, culture change often happens in weird ways, and the way it will not change is that everyone becomes a better person overnight. It'd be great I think initially it happens in response to the fear of sanction. Yeah, exactly. And then as time passes, people become, you know, fear turns into something approaching ethical conduct. You know, but it takes a while. The fear of not getting that job because of something on your Instagram is actually quite powerful. And it's the basis of your successors behaving that way instinctively. Shall we move on to Criterion? Which is Criterion UK. There was no kind of elegant segue, something so grave as that. There wasn't a kind of glib way of moving on. But I do want to talk about this new partnership with Criterion UK. And Pete, you've masterminded it, so why don't you talk about it a bit? Sure. So I don't know if anyone or everyone is as nerdy as I am, But Criterion are the Criterion Collection. They're based in America, and for film fans, they are the gold standard. They've been operating for many, many years now, many decades. They started out releasing laser discs, I think, in the 80s, if you remember laser discs.
I do remember laser discs.
No.
Olive doesn't remember.
Olive won't remember laser discs.
They look like vinyls.
Yeah, they look like 12-inch records, but silver.
Yeah, and they were pre-DVD DVDs.
What did you put them in?
Into a laserdisc player.
Into a display, and they were too cool for school. I mean, they were really. It looked like the future, really, didn't it? And it so wasn't.
So Criterion used to put on laserdiscs, and then they shifted to
Yeah.
DVDs like normal people, and now Blu-rays and the rest of it. But they have always. They're an ongoing selection of important films. Is how they build themselves. So it's great films, old ones, more recent ones, done in very nice editions. So often the films are restored, and they'll have good extras with them, and interviews and commentaries and all those sorts of things. They moved over to the UK. They set up a UK arm a few years ago. So every month a few Blu-rays are released in the UK. And thankfully we have done a partnership with Criterion UK, which is tremendously exciting, and it will tell itself in very many ways, starting with essays on every single one of their releases,
Such as
their latest release is here, which is My Man Godfrey, which is
a classic.
It's a classic, a totally Fruit Loops screwball comedy from 1936 or 37, it says on the box. 1936. And it's sort of one of the... if you haven't seen it, and I know you have, Matt, Olive, you haven't seen it. I'd recommend it. It's totally crazy. And
really, really bananas, isn't it?
Yeah. I rewatched it to write an essay for the site, which went up earlier this week. And when I say like it's mad, I mean it's mad. It seems like something that would almost be made nowadays to be played at 1 a.m. when you're drunk or on drugs. It's really strange, and strange in a way that the movies that came after it, because this is often cited as the first screwball comedy, and we know about the screwball comedies afterwards, like His Girl Friday or Philadelphia Story or Bringing Up Baby or Easy Living. I think is a very underrated film. So often those films, they're kind of crazy, but they're also quite urbane and sophisticated, and it's rat-a-tat dialogue and very clever and very mannered. And My Man Godfrey is anything but. So I would basically encourage everyone to see it. You will not see another film like it, and that's a cliche, and it's oversaid, but it is true in the case of My Man Godfrey.
And the great thing about the Criterion UK partnership is that these are films that quite often don't get seen at all.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them aren't available even on demand or streaming services, are they? I mean, these are films which you can only get quite often in Blu-ray form.
Yeah, Criterion have moved over, particularly in America, a bit more to streaming. They are behind Filmstruck in America, one of the great streaming services. But a way that a lot of the more niche streaming services work is that the films drop off after a certain time. Filmstruck do that. I think ones like Mubi do it as well, where you have a selection for a month. So it means that even if they get onto the streaming service,
it's only for a limited time.
Temporary.
Yeah, sure.
So that's why physical is so good and remains a good thing, because it's reliable.
Do you buy Blu-rays or DVDs?
No, I don't. My laptop does not have a DVD slot.
It's really interesting.
I have to stream everything.
So, one of the things we've been interested in is actually, if you look at the great lists of films, the top 100 films that, Pete Knight did one in a previous incarnation of the top 50, wasn't it? And quite a lot of them aren't easily available on streaming services.
Yeah,
so
it's really annoying.
It is really annoying, and I think it's one of those sort of something must be done questions. But I also think I'm right that most people now under 30 don't tend to buy DVDs and Blu-rays, correct? I mean, it seems to be the case.
I think most
as
people I know,
a resident under 30-year-old.
Well, Pete's kind of young in spirit, but I mean,
yeah, and I don't really know anyone that buys DVDs.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents do, and sometimes at Christmas I'll get a DVD for Christmas, but that did actually stop with my laptop when I got a new laptop that didn't have a DVD thing.
Yes, I felt that when that sort of moment came in laptop technology, it was really the end of an era, and it is a shame in a way, because for now, there is going to be a gap when all these amazing movies are not easily available to people, and I think, well, I would urge people to try the Criterion UK films, because they are uniformly sensational,
and read our essays on
and
them.
More to the point, I was going to say, read the essays that will go with them,
and we'll be doing more stuff other than essays as well.
On the subject of that, I think, as here we are on day 12 of this exciting adventure. I mean, speaking as editor, I'm one of the pieces that went live today and absolutely thrilled me was Pam Hutchinson's essay on A Star Is Born.
Yeah.
Have you seen either of the others or any of the others, Olive, at all? Because they're...
No, I haven't.
I mean,
I need to do my homework this weekend.
I haven't seen all of them, I must confess. I think Pete has. You have seen all of them. First of all, let's talk a bit about Pam Hutchinson herself.
Yeah.
So let us celebrate her.
Okay. Well, Pamela is a hero of mine, and I think she exemplifies what we want to achieve with a lot of our writing with Drugstore Culture.
Yeah.
In that she's ridiculously knowledgeable. She's knowledgeable about film in general, but particularly about silent films. So she runs the blog Silent London. She wrote a very good book recently on Pandora's Box, the Pabst movie with Louise Brooks in it, and so she really knows her stuff. And you'll see it in reading the Star Is Born essay that she wrote for us. That knowledge is worn very lightly. Her writing is just so engaging. It's fun, it's light, and it just encourages you. You read one of her articles, and you just want to go watch those movies.
Yeah, so writing isn't forbidding, which
exactly.
I like a lot. Because I think a lot of film writing is very.
Yeah.
Frankly, it seems its primary purpose is to say, "I'm cleverer than you."
Yeah.
But that's not how she writes.
No, exactly, and it's not how a lot of our contributors write particularly on the film side, but all round. I mean, because this is what we're trying to achieve. But on the film side, James Oliver is the same. People will have writing for us like Lucy Sculls, Thomas McMullen, who writes about film but has done some stuff on us about art. These are welcoming writers, which is what cultural criticism should be about. You shouldn't erect barriers to entry.
Do you think, Olive, that cinephiles, film fans, film experts have been too cliquey, too nerdy? I mean, is there a great big sort of harvest out there that could be made more available if it was a bit more accessible and more?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think when writing about films, or like any kind of culture, I think art as well is like one that can be quite like feel exclusive. So you just need to kind of do what Pam does and explain it to the reader without being patronising. Or there's like two sides that you can go. You can either be too patronising, or you can be too, not explain it enough, and people just don't know what you're talking about if they're not familiar with the content. So I think we're hitting a really nice middle ground there.
Yeah.
But I do feel like people who are like into film, they tend to forget. I mean, I know I follow a few YouTubers who are into film, and sometimes they just reference so many things quickly in their videos, and it's really hard to keep up with. And it's those are the people that I unsubscribe from, and the people that I do subscribe to are the people who will explain stuff. I
often feel that some film writers forget how brilliant film is, which is a very odd thing to say, but they forget how exciting it is when a trailer drops. Two big trailers dropped this week. There was Creed 2, which actually looks rather good, and the new X-Men movie,
Dark Phoenix,
which we are less sure of,
I'm in two minds about.
And Fantastic Beasts.
Oh, of course, yeah, absolutely.
Three big trailers.
So that, and it's interesting to me that that energy that can now go into a trailer campaign can't be harnessed to people's interest in older film. I mean, if you think about how much sort of heat comes out of just those three events, it's huge on social media, and yet there's this big barren wasteland between that and classic film. And I think one of our missions is to kind of, you can't expect people to respond to Persona or Tarkovsky in the same way as they would to a superhero trailer, but they're not totally unconnected. I mean, I think that's one of our philosophies, isn't it?
Yeah. I guess so. I should also say, like, that terrain is not completely barren. You know, obviously there's the people like Pamela write for other publications as well. We're not the only people who will be doing this and writing about film engagingly. And also there are interesting developments. So Twitter's a good example. There's lots of Twitter feeds that are sort of silent movie GIFs. There's one I like, Nitrate Diva is often like cool pictures and GIFs from old movies, and there's literally one called Silent Movie GIFs, I think, that has hundreds of thousands of followers. And these are repackaging old movies in a way that people find enjoyable and retweetable, crucially, which would not have happened years and years and years ago. And also thanks to Criterion, other great Blu-ray labels, DVD labels like Masters of Cinema and Arrow, availability, it can be hard to find sometimes. You know, you're saying with streaming, but if you look, you can often find these things, and the position is certainly better than it was 10 or 20 years ago. So we've got, you know, you can find good old movies, and they are being presented in ways that are sort of fun and engaging, but there's still a strange disconnect, I feel. So even with these Twitter feeds, even with GIFs, I do wonder where the appreciation of the actual movies comes in then. How many people see a Laurel and Hardy GIF and actually go watch a Laurel and Hardy movie? I mean, it's a good thing having the GIF. It's a good thing that people are being introduced to Laurel and Hardy in some way, but then it's the next step that's the crucial thing. And that's where I think like good writing really does come in, and that's where people like Pamela certainly help people like James Oliver, and it's also where we can help as a publication.
Yes. So I'm going to close by asking both of you, and then I'll add one for a film recommendation, or something you're looking forward to. Want to come up with one?
Olive, you can go first. Okay, I wasn't expecting this. Gosh, I mean, the film I'm most looking forward to is The Favourite, which I think will open London Film Festival. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Killing of a Sacred Deer, the director's previous movie.
Great movie.
It's just so
stunning
good.
Movie.
But in terms of a recommendation, what have I been watching recently? Well, I've watched My Man Godfrey recently. I really enjoyed the Masters of Cinema Witness for the Prosecution, which I recommended on our prescription page on the website recently, which is I'll recommend that. That's a great Agatha Christie adaptation that is underappreciated by Billy Wilder as well. I'm
looking forward to Widows, and the film I'm going to recommend and we'll be writing about in due course on the site is Mr. Jolly Lives Next Door, which is a comic strip classic with Rick Mayall and Ed Edmondson, which is in its 30th anniversary year. Okay,
I am looking forward to Suspiria because I'm into horror films, and the film I'm going to recommend is a bit of a chick flick, but it's I think it's called Letters to All the Boys I've Ever Loved. It's a Netflix film that came out recently, and it's on Netflix now. Yeah, Netflix at the moment. It's like a teen kind of a film, but I love it.
Good.
Guilty pleasure.
Brilliant.
Not so guilty.
Something for everyone to watch at the weekend. And everyone have a great weekend from all of us here at Drugstore Culture. Thanks, guys.